For those of us who do not believe in the legitimacy of the Old Testament, especially the book of Genesis and Exodus, the Christian fundamentalist maintains that the stories happen just as they're written and that us skeptics are all wrong. But who actually are all of us? Take a look and we'll see how many of us would have to be wrong for the fundamentalist to be right. How many times have you been in a debate with a Christian fundamentalist in which you're trying to show them the reason and rationality of why the story of Genesis, Exodus, and the Great Flood myth is nothing but that, a simple myth? You try to show them the plethora of evidence, which not only supports your contention of the evolutionary process and the fact that it took eons for the earth to form and become what it is today, and what is their response? Everyone who tells you this is wrong. Well, let's explore exactly who everyone actually is. Well, first we have to start with basic science. And it's not just one science that completely disproves the story of Genesis, including the Great Flood myth. It's all of them. The first people that have to be wrong would be the geologists, which that genre has been around for a few hundred years now. All the information that shows the millions of years it took to layer the rock strata, like in the Grand Canyon, where they clearly show that more primitive fossils were in more primitive layers of the rock, and not dropped on top of each other in the course of one global flood. The radiometric dating of rocks, also completely wrong. And within geology, there's those who specifically study floods. And unless they're fundamentalist and ignoring the science right in front of them, they don't agree with the Christian evangelicals either. They must be wrong as well. Then there's a group that specializes in plate tectonics, how our continents have moved over time. We know how they move over time because we've been measuring that as well. We even have GPS coordinates today that show how they move, what direction they're moving to, and how much they move yearly. All those guys, according to the fundamentalist, also wrong. Then, of course, you have the physicists when they explain through the coefficient of friction and other means how much heat would have been produced if the continents had moved across the earth in a mere 40 days, like the fundamentalist contends with their so-called non-peer-reviewed science, and show that the oceans would actually be boiling if the continental plates had moved in such a fashion. They must be wrong too. And how about those paleoanthropologists, the ones who study evolutionary biology? Never mind that we found bones of Cro-Magnon man, Neanderthal man, and what certainly looks like a transitional fossil into what was later man, codenamed Lucy. Never mind all the transitional fossils that they found between species as they were developing. Even though we can completely show them to you, the Christian fundamentalist still contends that transitional fossils don't exist, so all those evolutionary biologists must be wrong as well. And how about those geneticists, those studying micro and macro evolutionary pattern? All that time spent on DNA sequencing, where they can mathematically show that all these species could not have developed into the variety that exists today in a mere few thousand years after this so-called mythical flood. They can show you the mathematical impossibility, but nope, they must be wrong as well. And how about all those astronomers? Never mind, like the physicists, they've determined what the speed of light is, and never mind that they can approximately judge the age of distant stars by observing their spectrum's luminosity and motion, and never mind that they can clearly show through that astrophysics that there is no way that the universe is a mere few thousand years old. All the astronomers, they must be wrong too. But it's not just the sciences, of course. There's many other groups of expertise that are wrong as well. Let's look at the group of historians. How about the experts in Egyptian history? Never mind that there's not one piece of single evidence of writing uncovered where any ruler stated that there was a global slavery of the Hebrew population in Egypt, and never mind that the historical archaeologists have greatly searched the entire area where the ancient Israelites would have wandered for 40 years and found not one single shred of evidence of archaeological effect, including pottery, utensils, weapons, or graveyards, that even remotely show that this mass migration happened, which would have been close to 2 million people if you include the women and children added to that 600,000 males that supposedly left Egypt in the book of Exodus. So there's no historical evidence in Egypt, there's no archaeological evidence in the wilderness toward the journey to Israel, but the historical archaeologists as well as the experts in Egyptian history, they must be wrong as well. And how about all the historical experts in Sumerian history? You know, the ones who've uncovered similar stories to the book of Genesis in the realms of how the world was created, and identical outlines of the Noah's flood myth. Never mind that we know the Sumerians were there before the Hebrews. Never mind that they have the stone tablets that show the Sumerians wrote about these topics before the Hebrews. And never mind that the topics are so similar, it's obvious that the Hebrews at least borrowed them. Some might say plagiarized them. Nope, those experts in Sumerian history, they're wrong as well. And never mind that all the historical archaeologists find absolutely no indication of a great flood ever occurring in Mesopotamia that covered the entire area, but only a few sections, which is reasonable as floods do happen. And never mind that they're backed by the atmospheric scientists who clearly state there's not enough water in the atmosphere to have a great flood of that magnitude. Why, they're all wrong as well. And how about all the archaeologists and historians who clearly say, again, not only is there no evidence of that Exodus, there's no evidence of Moses himself, in which many historians will show you that other cultures also had their own version of the Moses story. And they'll also clearly show you that there's no evidence that Abraham existed as well. That entire group of historians, they're also wrong according to the Fundamentalist. So no, we shouldn't trust any historians or historical archaeologists who continue to tell us there's no evidence of a Hebrew enslavement in Egypt. There's tons of evidence that show the Hebrews most likely borrowed the Noah Great Flood myth and the story of creation from the Sumerians. There's no evidence that Moses existed, and we certainly shouldn't trust all those genres of science that I just mentioned, which continue to prove their advancement by becoming sophisticated enough to put a space shuttle in orbit, brought medicine to a level that can cure stage 1 and 2 cancer now, and now can study black holes millions of miles away. You shouldn't trust any of that. You should trust fundamentalist archaeologists, or those who pretend to be, like the late Ron Wyatt, who wasn't even a real archaeologist and wouldn't turn any of his findings over for peer review to the ones who actually were. You should trust the Institute of Creation Research, who isn't peer reviewed into agreement with mainstream science ever, and has multiple theories, which are unable to be accurately tested for repeated and conclusive results that nobody takes seriously except those in the Institute for Creation Research. You should trust Ken Ham, who can't even accurately describe the physical features of the Grand Canyon in order to make his case that the flood created it in one swoop. You should trust John Baumgartner, the fundamentalist who contends that the continental plates moved across the planet in 40 days by a concept known as runaway subduction, even though his own data shows if this happened, the oceans would boil. You should trust John Sanford and his ridiculous theory of genetic mutations that explain why Adam and Eve lived to be almost 1,000 years old by using Dr. Kimura's model, even though Dr. Kimura said before he died that Sanford wasn't using the model correctly to begin with. So, Christian fundamentalists, and especially the youth in Christian fundamentalism, if this video came across you, look at the mass groups of scientists, historians, and historical archaeologists that would all have to be wrong for the creationists to be right. And then look at the credibility of the ones who are stating they are right. And then ask yourself, if you have this many mountains of evidence surrounding you, and you believe what they're spouting off from a little molehill that can be blown away with the first wind of reason, wouldn't that kind of make you a cult member? And that's why I contend that the Christian fundamentalist is. Now, if you'd like to see some more videos disproving Genesis with facts and reason, check out the end card playlist at the end of this video right now, and I will see you next time as we once again take that sword of reason and reality and thrust it right through the heart of ignorance.